A seed germinates underground in total darkness. No light, no map, no clue which way is up. Put a blindfolded human in that exact spot, and honestly, we would be digging sideways within seconds, maybe apologizing to a worm. So how does a seed figure out which way to grow? And just how much decision-making is actually happening inside something that does not even have a brain? Today, on Guess What I Found Out, we are getting into the secret navigation system hiding inside every seed you have ever planted. And stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to find out plants might be quietly listening to something you cannot even hear. Let's call our seedlings the Sprout Scouts, because that is basically their job description the moment they germinate. No eyes, no nervous system, nothing resembling a brain, and yet they need to figure out that light is up, water is down, and their whole future depends on getting that call right on the first try, in the dark underground, with 0 practice runs. The first tool the Sprout Scouts reach for is gravity. In 1806, a British botanist named Thomas Andrew Knight strapped germinating seeds to the rim of a wheel in his garden and let a stream spin it continuously at around 150 rotations per minute. With gravity's usual pull scrambled by the spin, the shoots grew toward the centre of the wheel and the roots grew outward, proving plants were responding to force, not sunlight, since there was no consistent light source guiding them. Knight then tilted the whole setup horizontal and sped it up to 250 rotations per minute, so gravity and centrifugal force were both tugging on the seedlings at once. The plants did not fully obey either force. They split the difference, growing at roughly an 80-degree angle instead of lining up with gravity or the spin alone. That single result from a wheel spinning in a garden 2 centuries ago was the first clue that a plant's sense of direction is not one fixed instinct triggered on or off. It is a running calculation, weighing more than one input at a time, which is exactly the theme for the rest of this video. The actual sensing happens inside cells called statocytes, tucked into the tips of roots and the columella of the root cap. Inside each statocyte are dense starch-filled grains called statoliths, and they behave exactly like the snow in a snow globe, settling to whichever side gravity happens to be pulling on any given moment. The Sprout Scouts read where those statoliths pile up and use that pile as a compass. Once they know which way is down, a growth hormone called auxin starts stacking up on one side of the tissue, and wherever auxin piles up, that side grows slower than the other, physically bending the whole root or shoot in the correct direction. No brain required, just chemistry quietly doing the steering. Here is where it gets weird, because, well, a compass alone is just not enough. Mathematical models of this process show that if a seedling only relied on statoliths, it would overcorrect, swing right past straight up, and have to wobble back and forth trying to find centre, kind of like an overcorrected steering wheel. So go ahead and hit subscribe now, because what actually stops that wobble is something you would not expect from a plant. A sense of its own body position, something researchers genuinely call plant proprioception. It's the same category of sense that lets you touch your nose with your eyes closed, or balance on a bike without looking down. Scientists studying this have even built a model around something called a bending number, which is basically a ratio of how much a plant trusts gravity versus how much it trusts its own sense of curvature. If you get that ratio right, a seedling can straighten itself out in real time without ever overshooting twice. Gravity and self-awareness get the Sprout Scouts pointed roughly the right way, but, light is what actually seals the deal. Charles Darwin and his son Francis ran the classic experiment on this way back in 1880, covering the tips of growing grass shoots with small tin foil caps. Not aluminum foil, since pure aluminum was still rarer and pricier than gold at the time. Only the uncovered tips bent toward the light. That told the Darwins the tip itself senses light and sends a signal down to the growing zone below, where auxin shows up again to bend the plant toward the brightest source available. Tell me in the comments which of these senses you think matters most for a seedling's survival, and why, because we are not done yet. Even with gravity, self-correction and light sorted out, a plant is nothing without water, and this is the part that genuinely surprised researchers at the University of Western Australia. Pea seedlings planted in Y-shaped pots, given a choice between dry soil and a sealed pipe carrying flowing water, grew their roots toward the pipe, even though the pipe was fully sealed and no moisture ever actually reached the soil around those roots. That rules out plain old moisture sensing entirely, since there was nothing damp anywhere near those roots to follow. The leading idea is that roots are picking up on the vibration of water moving inside the pipe itself, essentially listening for it the way you might feel a washing machine running through a wall. The lead researcher on that study put it plainly: the plants just knew the water was there, even though the only thing available to detect was the sound of it flowing. Which means we may need to add hearing, in some loose sense, to the Sprout Scout's toolkit, right alongside gravity, self-position and light. This whole investigation reminds me of when we mapped out the ice attic a couple videos back and realized that frozen shell around our solar system was never the empty void we assumed either. Different scale entirely. Trillions of miles out there versus a few millimeters of root tip down here, but the same lesson keeps showing up. The more carefully we look at something we assumed was simple, the more sensing and decision-making we find hiding inside it. If you are into biology turning up intelligence in unexpected places, go watch our episode on Spud Cell, the neediest houseguest in biology. Because potatoes have their own weird sensing story to tell, too. Now, stay with me, because the real twist is what happens when all of these senses disagree with each other at once. Out in a bare, open field, gravity and light point the exact same direction, straight up, so growth is simple. But put that same seedling under a park bench or beside a wall, and suddenly light comes from one side while gravity still insists on straight up, and the plant has to negotiate between the two. If the light is faint, gravity wins, and the stem stays close to vertical. If the light is strong and coming in hard from one side, the plant can bend all the way to something like a 45-degree angle, splitting the difference between two competing instructions running at the same time. This is not one hardwired command steering the plant. It is closer to a running negotiation between at least 4 different senses: gravity, self-position, light, and possibly water vibration, all being weighed against each other constantly, second by second, for the entire life of that plant. We still do not fully understand every piece of how a seed goes from a speck underground to a standing plant reaching for the sun, but we do know the process is not simple, and it is definitely not passive. That little Sprout Scout cannot pick up and walk anywhere it wants, but it is quietly gathering and weighing more real-time data about its surroundings than most of us ever give it credit for. If any of this changed how you look at the plants on your windowsill, smash that like button and subscribe so you catch what we dig up next. Thanks for watching. See you there, Curious George.